Well, hello, everybody. And thank you for joining us today. In today's session, we're going to learn why stress and anxiety is created in the brain, how it shows up, what you can do as a parent or caregiver, and how you can give one of the biggest gifts possible, which is help a child build resilience. My name is Monique Wintelkamp, and I have the pleasure of working with teams and leaders to become the best that they can be. But my real passion is helping individuals connect with their confidence and trust their authentic voice and authentic self and follow their purpose. As mentioned, I'm a trained coactive coach and an emotional intelligence coach. And in my spare time, I fill it with my family, with my husband and my soon to be 2-year-old daughter. Here we are all supporting lockdown hair. I am also dyslexic and I thrive to create an environment where dyslexia is not only understood, but supported and celebrated for the gifts that it can bring. So I'm looking forward to the next hour that we spend together. Let's start off then by actually looking why stress is triggered and what happens in our brain. The amygdala in our brain doesn't know the difference between a perceived threat and a real one. The primal part of our brain, when it sees a threat, such as having to read out loud, recite something, or write in front of everybody, it sees it as the same as this. Our body has the exact same reaction, releasing the exactly same hormones. So, cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and adrenaline, which is your fight or flight response. So, the brain can't see the difference between a perceived and an actual threat. Now, these hormones do have their place. They're great when you're wanting to run away from danger, or you're running a marathon, or defending yourself, but not in learning or environments where you need to be calm to be able to absorb information. Individuals with dyslexia are confronted regularly by tasks that are either in reality or in perception extremely difficult for them. These tasks might be the reading, the spelling, the memory. If they have experienced success at mastering these kinds of tasks in the past, they're able to face that challenge with a sense of confidence based on the belief that I can do this task because I've done it before. If, on the other hand, like many dyslexic children, they have met this with repeated failure when attempting, our body and brain may be working together to send out a chemical warning system that gets translated as this is going to be way too difficult for you. Retreat, retreat. That's bad stress in action. And remember that perception is everything. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher, a friend, or a parent that believes in the child. If the child doesn't believe it themselves, it doesn't matter. If a dyslexic child has been embarrassed or struggled before, they're more likely to have stress the next time they do that activity, as our brain makes connection with past experiences. Let's look at that fight or flight response that many of you have probably heard of and know some stuff about, but it's handy to recap some of the signs and symptoms. The first one is that rapid heartbeat and that breathing. So our respiratory rate increases to provide the body with energy and oxygen needed to fuel that rapid response to the danger that they see. That's the I want to run out of this classroom door before I get called on to be able to do that. The next one is the pale or flushed skin. So blood flow to the surface areas of the body is reduced while the flow to the muscles, brain, legs, and arms is increased. And the paleness is between the flushed face and blood vessels in the head is common. The blood, the reason the body does this is to help with the blood with clotting ability to prevent excess blood loss in event of being attacked by that lion. The next one is diluted pupils. In times of danger, our body prepares itself to be aware of its surroundings. So dilation of the pupils allows more light into the eyes, resulting in better vision of the surroundings. The last one is trembling. So our muscles tense and become primed for action. which can cause that trembling and shaking. After the perceived threat or actual threat has gone, it takes between 20 to 60 minutes for our body to turn to normal. You can probably think of a time when you experience this fight or flight response. When faced with something frightening, you can feel your heartbeat quicken. You may even start breathing faster, and your entire body becomes tense and ready for action. This is something that a dyslexic child might feel every time they perceive a threat or have some stress or some anxiety. So knowing the symptoms and being able to talk about it is just one element. Let's deep dive into some of the signs of stress in different age children and some of the anxiety parts as well. So with the younger children, you'd have things like being irritable, tearful, clingy, waking up in the night, having bad dreams, start wetting the bed, and difficulty sleeping. Signs of stress aren't just at the time of when something happens. It also shows up in other parts of life. Think about yourself and how stress shows up within work that you might be issuing, but it also happens in your personal life as well. It shows up with the lack of sleep. If we look at the older children and the signs of stress here, we see things like the lack of confidence, the angry outbursts. This one's particularly, I know some of my clients find difficult as they see it as a personal attack quite often. Avoiding activities like going out with friends or family, negative thoughts and talk track, problems sleeping, eating, and hard to concentrate. Again, not ideal in a learning scenario. So how is anxiety different from stress then? Simply put, anxiety is a state of worry about what might be, as compared to stress, which is a reaction to what is. Both stress and anxiety trigger the same chemical reactions in the brain, which does a really good job at remembering negative experiences. If you worry all the time about something bad happening to you, that puts you in a state of chronic stress. Anxiety comes in many forms. It can be situational, so that's specific to one kind of worry, for example, traveling or social situations. And individuals with dyslexia may experience marked anxiety in situations where they feel they will make mistakes, be ridiculed, or be made to feel foolish in front of others. It's not surprising that kids with dyslexia feel more anxious at times. They can face many stressful situations throughout the day. Many of those situations involve what ifs. A big part of anxiety is that what if. And here are a couple of examples. So the first one, a child with dyslexia may have to go to a slightly easier bookshelf when the class is picking books to read. The what if voice comes in, asking them, well, what if someone sees me and thinks I'm stupid or a baby? Second example is the class is taking turns reading passages from a book. The what if voice comes in and says, what if the teacher calls on me and I stumble over my words and I look stupid? Stress and anxiety increase when we're in situations over which we have little or no control. All people, young and old, can experience overwhelming stress and exhibit signs of anxiety. But children, adolescents, and adults with dyslexia are particularly vulnerable. That's because many individuals do not fully understand the nature of their learning disability, and as a result, tend to blame themselves for their own difficulties. Years of self-doubt may erode a person's self-esteem, making them less able to tolerate the challenges of school, later work, or social interactions, and become more stressed and more anxious. Feeling a lack of control is a common source of anxiety, and kids with dyslexia can feel like nothing they do will make a difference. They can't even control how they're able to read words, use their memory, or put things in order. There are some physical signs of anxiety that comes out. The same signs that we saw in the fight or flight, but additional ones you might notice is the feeling sick, the dry mouth, cotton wool mouth, I've often heard it referred to, irritable bowel syndrome, sweating, and getting hot. So you also feel hot and flustered around some different tasks. Thoughts and feelings that a dyslexic child with anxiety might be thinking is the upsetting or scary negative thoughts, feeling frightened, feeling overwhelmed, full of dread, like there's no way out, on constant alert, so there's no downtime. Remember that fight or flight mode is you're just always on, so not able to shut off, and that constant worry that drives them. So this is all not good news for learning. So have you ever tried to learn something whilst under extreme stress? Maybe you're having to try and listen to someone, but it's just noise, it's not really going in. Or have you ever tried to read something and your mind's not really been able to be with it and you've read and reread that same sentence or paragraph again just to try and absorb it, but it still doesn't go in? That's exactly what happens when we try and learn new information when we're feeling stressed or anxious. Our ability to retrieve and encode information from stored memories can be quite easily hijacked by stressful situations. Stress has been shown to destroy our ability to retrieve old memories, which for me personally is a killer for dyslexia because I am already struggling with that. Add in the stress moment, I have no chance. So it offers a brain-based explanation for why we so often blank out during these types of memory-related performances. A dyslexic child trying to remember a formula off by heart whilst their body is under stress is just not going to work. I remember being one of my biggest fears, and one I've actually come to accept now, that trying to retrieve that information when I need it most under stress is just not going to happen. I loved science, and in that classroom, I understood everything and I could explain everything. It was one of my favorite subjects. But when it came to reciting the proper names for reactions, formulas, or terms, I struggled. Therefore, in exams, I really struggled. These stress-induced changes in the brain activity could help explain why stress seems to disrupt the use of prior knowledge to facilitate memory-related tasks, such as those required when writing that final exam. This also goes for when a child is worried so much about being asked a question in front of the class and not knowing the answer. They can't pay attention to what is being said or even absorb it. I became a master of being able to hide my dyslexia for many years. I built coping mechanisms that would limit my exposure or be able to be put out of risk of being found out. This involves some very creative and very out of the box thinking. And you might find that with some dyslexic children and neurodiverse children in general. And especially girls, they do the same, and that tends to be why they get a later diagnosis. You ask any dyslexic adult to give an example of something they put in place to help them hide or assist them with their dyslexia when they're at school or even work, and I am pretty sure they could actually name you quite a few. This creative thinking is incredible and something to really celebrate and harness rather than them see it as just something that they have to do or to survive just to get by. A study of self-made millionaires in the UK found that 40% of them were dyslexic, and a former Cisco CEO, Chambers, estimates that 25% of CEOs are dyslexic, but many of them won't talk about it. This creative thinking and problem solving can be harnessed to create incredible results. Emotional intelligence and its understanding has really boomed over the last few years, as more and more studies are showing that this holds far more weight and a predictor of success than IQ. A study of dyslexic children in the 1990s that spanned 20 years looked at the effect of emotional intelligence and IQ in predicting a child's success. The study demonstrated that IQ scored or academic achievements of a student whilst enrolled in school had between 0 and 5% predicted power in explaining the variation in their long-term outcomes. At the same time, emotional and attitude success attributes, two of which we'll explore here today, explained 49 to 75% of the variance in the students' long-term outcomes. Put another way, academic achievements and IQ scores predicted next to nothing about the future of these dyslexic students. What mattered most was their ability to bounce back, get help from others, and take action. The first step in you helping your child with emotional intelligence is to first look at yourself. One of the first things you are taught as a coach is self-management. When talking to clients and even in your day-to-day life, this also applies for parents and caregivers as children in general, not just those with dyslexia. But it can be harder with children that we see as struggling or need extra support. Let's look at what we need to do around self-management. The first one is to check in with yourself. Are you in the right frame of mind? Are you tired? Are you stressed? Have you got a lot going on at the moment? If that is probably the case, it's probably not a good time to be having this conversation. But as you practice your self-management more and become increasingly aware of your self-management, what you can do is when you check in with yourself, you can understand, acknowledge those emotions, those judgments, and actually leave them at the door before having a conversation. The next is detach your thoughts and judgments and just be present. This is super hard to do as you love this child, but take a breath and see that if you park your own thoughts and judgments and just be present and truly listen to what they have to say, you will find out so much more. And the last is show empathy. Empathy is not sympathy. The feeling sorry for someone else, the poor you. Empathy is actually understanding things from the other person's perspective, their view of the world. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with them. That comment is very important to people that have teenagers. Empathy is actually made up of three components, which we'll explore now. The first is listening. The process for listening well is called active listening, or within coaching, we call it level 2 or level 3. Active listening is a communication technique that requires the listener to understand, interpret, and evaluate what they hear. The ability to listen actively can improve personal relationships through reduced conflicts, strengthening cooperation, and fostering understanding. It involves suspending one's own frame of reference, suspending that judgment and avoiding other internal mental activities that you've got going on, and be fully present with the speaker. Giving the child you are listening to your full attention, no perceived opinion, no judgment, or the need or want to just fix it there and then for them, but be completely present if you were the only two people in that space. The next is curiosity. Great listeners are genuinely curious about what other people are thinking. So when they listen, they really want to understand how the other person views the world and how they generally want to learn about the other person's experience. Think about a conversation you've had with a child when you maybe weren't as curious. You had your own views, your outcomes, your beliefs. What would that conversation have been like if you've just become curious about what they were saying? What was behind what they were saying? What was their world like for them? This, like listening, is a skill that needs to be practiced and continually. Going back to self-management, it's realizing when you've slipped out of curiosity and you're starting to apply your own judgment, making that mental check with yourself. The last element is that emotional connection. If you can communicate that you understand the other person's experience, you will build a valuable connection with them. Goleman refers to the experience of two or more people being on the same wavelength emotionally as synchronous vibration. When people feel the connection and feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, feelings, and ideas, they are truly in sync. Imagine a teacher that can create this with a dyslexic child to help them with their learning. A parent that does this to help them understand their child and create a space of psychological safety. There are two hormones I want to bring your attention to here when it comes to creating that connection. The first is oxytocin, otherwise known as the love hormone. Sharing stories like some of the personal pieces that I've done already creates more of a bond and a trust between us. The second hormone is endorphins. This can come from humor. And I will illustrate this with a story now. So I must have been about 7 or 8 years old when I was asked to wash my parents' car. And for some reason, I was really struggling with the idea of washing their car. So in the dirty window, I wrote the word can't, as if to say, I can't do this, really big. It wasn't until later when my mum came in looking quite horrified that I realized that I'd misspelt the word to something that was quite rude, apparently. I had put a U instead of an A in the word can't. Humor can actually break down barriers and make children feel at ease. Being aware of these hormones will help you create that connection more. So the oxytocin, sharing that personal story, but also having a bit of humor and a bit of fun with it can also help. Inviting the conversation. So you've done the self-management and you're in a good space. You've made the conscious decision to review the elements of empathy. Let's look at some quick tips about having that conversation and how to get that going. When I first became pregnant with my nearly 2-year-old, having that emotional intelligence background, I was quite keen to see if there was anything that was really specific to children around building emotional intelligence. And again, I'll send these references out in that PDF, but there's an amazing and beautiful book called The Whole Brain Child. And one of the techniques they talk about in here is name it, detain it. So when a child experiences a painful or disappointing or scary moment, it can be really overwhelming. And as parents and caregivers, we can help them understand what is happening. We can do this by retelling the story. It helps them engage their emotions and their logical brain when retelling that story. Understand it by naming it, and then you can more easily able to tame it. So remove some of that fear or be in the place to look at options. And a warning here, they won't always want to tell their story again or explain to you what happened. This is when your self-management comes in the most. It's important to respect that during that space and try again later when you're both in a good frame of mind. And a top tip I was once told by a child psychology friend was when you're doing activities together, you've probably heard this before, if you're doing activities together and you're feeling relaxed, that's a great time to start that conversation and enable them to tell that story again. Segal and Bryson state that kids often need, and especially when they experience strong emotions, is to have someone help them use their left brain to make sense of what's going on, to put things in order, to name these big, scary right brain feelings so they can deal with them more efficiently. This is what storytelling does. So as well as getting them to retell their story, and with younger children, helping them tell and retell that story because the memory isn't quite there. But not only that, allowing them to share their stories with other children with dyslexia. And you as a parent and caregiver, sharing stories of other dyslexic people that you know and how they've become successful and what they did to their lives. Number two is ditch the how was your day. If nothing else, please take this away with you. So instead, start replacing it with what was the best bit of your day today? Was there anything that you found challenging today? What part of that challenge did you want to discuss to see how we can come up with solutions together? Not just an autopilot comment that other children get used to. Number three is talking about it in a language that is appropriate for your child. So talking and explaining what stress and anxiety is. For example, with younger children, and even with my daughter, when she's going with her grandparents or off to nursery for the day, she might start getting upset or show signs of anxiety at leaving mummy by becoming clingy or upset. I first call out what I'm seeing. You seem upset about leaving mummy. I now actually get a muffled, yeah, through the tears. But as a baby, the sobbing would just slow down slightly. I follow this up with, is it because you think you won't see mummy for a while? And again comes the muffled, yeah. I then acknowledge the feelings and share with her my own. So I miss you too when I'm not with you. And it's okay to feel this way. But we will see each other again in a little bit and we can have a big hug. And the clinginess gets less. I've recognized, we've shared, and we were able to look and talk about what we can do moving forward. With an older child, you might want to actually describe what stress feels like to you as a starting point, what you have experienced. I've had conversations with teenagers where I have described my whole body getting really warm and my breath getting short. This often invites them to start sharing their experiences. When you can explain what stress and anxiety is, it forms an understanding in the child's brain. Again, depending on the age of the child, you might actually want to talk them through the bodily changes and the chemical changes that we've spoken about here to help them understand. I often describe it as a wave that comes over you when you think something will happen or you feel uncomfortable, but it's always reassuring to know the wave passes. I have a conversation around what helps that wave pass quicker, what will help you really realize when that wave is growing, and what do they need from me and themselves to help with that wave. Strategies for dealing with some stress and anxiety. And I'm very conscious this will be very high level and a few tips, but there are many resources out there that give incredible practical guides. And again, I can make sure some of those links are within the PDF that we send out. So spending some time with your child, understanding that they can help themselves feel better when feeling stressed and anxious. So here are a couple that might work for your child. Number one is breathing. It's so simple. We hear it everywhere, but my word, does it work? Doing some slow and deep breathings right into the stomach, breathing in and breathing out, keeping that spine nice and straight, where your only concentration is on that breath. This stops the release of any more stress hormones. It starts to calm the body down more and more, talks it off that cliff of that fight or flight response. Number two is exercise or an activity where your child finds it calming. Not every child is into going out running or playing football. Have one that they can do on their own to build up their own calming sensation. But also, if you can do an activity together, this also provides an incredible space for you to be able to talk, where the environment feels very secure and supported. Number three is mindfulness. I have a few clients that actually use meditation apps such as Headspace for Kids, Calm, and Smiling Mind, aimed at kids at all ages. They do this together before or after school or before bed, making time for their mental health and making it just as normal as their physical health, allowing and inviting conversations and space to talk about mental health and feelings. We've looked at where stress comes from. We've also started to look at how to invite that conversation and what you need to do to be able to be in that right place for that conversation. Let's now look at how you can help them build resilience. Resilience actually falls under optimism. It's not a passive, it's an active engagement in change. As this sentence says, optimism is not, I know things will get better. That's the passive. I know it will happen. Just sit here. Optimism is the conviction that I can make this better. That's the active. I can actively do something that will make a difference and change. So optimism isn't that rose-colored glasses of everything is going to be okay. Optimism has regularly been shown to be the single biggest predictor of success in life. And that statement in itself is huge. It is a life strategy that involves a way of sensing opportunities, seeing over the horizon, and developing a deep emotional courage and resilience. Optimistic people look for the benefit in every situation. They seek the valuable lesson from what's happened. They also focus on the task to be accomplished rather than negative emotions. And interestingly, they have greater resilience to colds and illnesses. They recover faster from illness and injury. And optimists can actually make considerably more money. But optimistic people generate energy and a positive mood that can be picked up by others. They can see the big picture and have a vision of where they're going. And they are characterized by these three attributes. The first one is positive mood. So optimistic people have a talent for maintaining and promoting a positive mood. This enables them to create a sustained and highly productive working environment and a climate of success. They are also more desirable to be around. And we can all probably think of family and friends that have that really infectious positive mood. For children, if they have that positive mood, they feel more relaxed. Therefore, in learning environments, they're able to get the most out of it. And that positive mood will feed into more confidence. So the dyslexia doesn't feel like so much of a secret they have to keep anymore. The next one is opportunity sensing. Optimistic people can see the bigger picture. They have a vision for where they're going. In times of change, they see the potential opportunities and benefits that they can take advantage of. With children, it's problem solving or joint problem solving with a caregiver, looking at what can be done differently or seeing an opportunity and just going for it. And the last element is resilience. The essence of resilience is to see the benefit in every situation, especially when there are setbacks. It's to seek the valuable lesson in every problem or difficulty and to focus on the task to be accomplished rather than the negative emotions such as fear or disappointment. Your ability to deal with setbacks and continue to work towards your goal will say more to other people than any other single factor. Helping to build resilience and optimism is by far one of the greatest gifts that will have the longest impact on a child's life. Helping a child look at what's perceived setbacks and has given them, what benefit sits there. This is easier said than done, even for us adults. But the great news is optimism can be improved and continually grown, even in adulthood. It's never too late. So unlike IQ, it can continue to grow. Here are a few quick top tips for helping build resilience in a child. The first one is fostering a child's strength. This is a great way to help begin the process of creating the ability to bounce back from adversity. Because if it's something they're good at, they can easily bounce back from it. This also goes hand in hand with the unconditional accepting of them from both their strengths and their weaknesses, accepting them all for everything. Think back to a time in your life where you didn't feel accepted for who you are or where you are now. And how does that follow through in your life? The next thing is spend some time together working out what they are amazing at, what gifts they are and what they excel at, and how you can help foster that and help them identify that that is a strength. My biggest learning was when I understood everyone has strengths. And the thing is that people also have stuff that they're not so good at. It's learning to celebrate your talents and natural abilities while understanding that you can't do so well in everything. And it's fine to ask for help for your weaknesses. For me, my two actually came hand in hand. I loved creative writing when I was young. I would lose myself in new worlds filled with fairies and giants and adventure. And my parents and teachers would celebrate my ability to write imaginative and creative stories. But my frustration came when they couldn't always read them or understand them due to my dyslexia. My parents spoke to me about how much they loved my stories and how it must be frustrating for me for people to not always be able to read them on their own, but how this did not take away from the amazing gift and talent my writing was. Together, we came up with ideas that would help me. This ranged from reading them to my mum, who would sit and type them out for me again, to speaking into a tape recorder. By doing this, my fear was removed with my parents. There was no judgment, and if I didn't spell something correctly. My confidence therefore grew in my writing. I was able to come up with creative ways also to help myself, even when my parents weren't present, because problem solving was now a part of my process. I understand the two sides of the sword now, and even at a young age when that first was drummed into me. But this by no way stopped me sending my mum every piece of creative writing I did during my degree to proofread and double check it. The next one is responsibilities that they can handle. Coming up with activities, responsibilities that give a child a sense of purpose, achievement. A responsibility that they can achieve is a great way of building optimism and self-confidence. But it's also important to allow that child to fail safely. If they do, you support them. Also discuss what happened and what is it now an opportunity for going forward. The last point, and probably one of the biggest, is the negative and positive internal voices. As a coach, I spend most of my coaching relationships talking about these voices. The negative ones often become so loud. If you do that, you'll look stupid. Remember last time that happened, it didn't go so well. It's the voice of you can't do that, you're not ready, people will find you out. You know it's a negative voice as you would never ever speak to someone else that you loved like that. As children, we aren't taught about these voices or thoughts, and therefore we have nothing to counteract that negative talk track, as it's easier and safer to listen to those voices. But if you can help your child identify that positive voice in their head, the one that says, you did amazing at that, you rocked, you've got this, you know you can do this. Wow. The voices get louder. Our brain starts to default to the voice that's more positive rather than the negative. Take a moment to think about the own voice inside you. Is yours more negative? What does that voice hold you back from doing? I'll let you into a secret here. Everyone has that negative voice. Mine starts to get really loud when I am due to give a talk. It says, no one will want to listen to you and what you have to say. And what the hell makes you an expert? Every time I get to the edge of my comfort zone, it gets louder, but I counteract it with the positive voice of, you've got this. Is there a link between emotional intelligence and dyslexia? There's this published study that came out in the early November 2020 of children with dyslexia who watched emotionally evocative videos, showed actually increasingly response psychologically and behaviorally to these videos compared to children without dyslexia. So the higher emotional reactivity correlated with the reaction in the system that supports emotional generation and self-awareness. So there is a growing awareness that dyslexia is often associated with hidden interpersonal strengths. The report says that some adults with dyslexia report they made it through school by charming their teachers. This ability to make social connections, often interpreted as purely compensatory strategy, could instead be a sign of enhanced emotional abilities at a neurological level. This statement does come with a warning though. A dyslexic diagnosis does not guarantee social success, as higher emotional reactivity and sensitivity can also be a risk factor for developing anxiety, as these children could possibly be detecting emotional cues differently from neurotypical. If emotional awareness plays such a big part of dyslexia, if we can translate this into the classroom, a child with an emotional connection with someone on a one-to-one level or a group setting, then it can decrease the feeling of anxiety and stress and make them feel more comfortable and confident in their learning. If there's 3 takeaways from tonight's session, it's invite that conversation. Also doing that self-management. Are you in the right place? Number 2, it's show empathy. That's your emotional intelligence from your side. And the third is help your child build that resilience. My name has been Monique Wintelkamp, and thank you so much for listening. And that's me, and I'm going to hand back.
Thank you, Monique. That was great. We've got lots of questions coming in, and we do have a bit of time. Lots of people saying thank you. So your self-doubt of whether anybody be interested, they certainly are. Getting lots of
Everyone
messages
has it,
coming
I
through.
tell you.
I know. Okay, right. So the messages are literally pinging in now, so I'll quickly try and grab some. So the first question is from Laura, and you did touch on the fact that exams cause stress. So Laura's asking for any advice on anxiety, knowing that a test is coming up for like teenagers, and what we would advise they did. They're already worrying.
Yeah, I mean, it's enough for any child to have to go and deal with, let alone with dyslexia added on top of that. Um, a couple of the techniques that are really helpful is to talk through the whole process. So, okay, so what's it going to be like then going into that exam? What's it going to feel like to sit down, turn that paper and sit there? What do you think you're going to experience sitting there? So getting them to live that and acknowledge what emotions and feelings are coming up. If you can do that, when it starts to happen as they walk in, they go, ah, this is that. So that logical brain starts interacting more rather than that emotional part of the brain. So just that understanding of the process and talking them through it. Another one is teaching them some relaxing breathing techniques. There's some great studies about power poses. So doing some power, I can send again this out, remind me, Nikki, and I can put this in the thing. Some techniques around power posing beforehand. I know this works. I've got friends with kids that will do this religiously before exams, and also some breathing techniques they can do as soon as they sit down, so to own the space, calm their mind, and be present. And these are techniques that you can start building up before the actual exam itself.
That's a great idea, and I hadn't actually thought about the fact that, obviously you're dealing with the stress knowing the exam's coming up or the test's coming up, but actually to get them to breathe through it when they sit down, because of course you're not there then trying to encourage them and give them a lot
No.
of optimism and stuff. So no, that's a really good idea. And actually the next question is from David. He's actually asking, can you teach someone to be optimistic if they're not
Oh,
a
yes. This is what I love about emotional intelligence. So IQ, you can go up to a point. Emotional intelligence is constantly built upon. So there are loads of techniques and things you can do out there to build optimism. Quick wins for adults, especially, so you can pass this on to teenagers and younger children, are to turn the talk track. So if you have a talk track of someone in your head going, you're not very good at this. It's very black and white, binary, you'll normally find. Catch that thought and identify that as a negative, and then change it a little. Go, well, actually, it might not be a strength, but I'm doing this. I'm doing the best I can. I can change this. So, catching that talk track is one of the big things you can do to build optimism from the start.
Brilliant, thank you. Another one about tests, but more about concentration for this one. So Anna is asking, my son has a maths test coming up and he's meant to be revising at home. However, in the evening, he's always very tired and finds it hard to concentrate. Getting him to sit and focus is near impossible. I've tried humour, bribery, and empathy, but I worry that if he doesn't revise, he won't do well. So this, I suppose this is more about encouraging and encouraging them to concentrate. And we all know kids don't like to do revision once they've done a day at school.
No. I remember my parents trying everything with me. I was the same. They would color code things. I'd have charts, you name it. I something that I know that works is actually the more you can include the child in the decision-making process. So often as parents, we go, right, this will be the best way for you to do it, the bribing, the sitting down, the making them do it. So actually sitting down and go, okay, what ideas have you got around this? For me personally, it was in the summer or when it wasn't raining, I would go and sit outside. If I was outside, I was in nature, I could have a good 10, 15 minutes where I could focus, but then I'd have to go away and do something. It couldn't be long periods of time. But it wasn't until I sat down and really analyzed where I best worked and my mind was more receptive did anything come out of that revision scenario. So you've probably already had a conversation with your son, but try again in the sense of, okay, when are you more engaged? What helps with you being engaged? And is there a time limit when you start to get tired? If it's just 10 minutes in one night, perfect. Just do 10 minutes and then we'll see other nights might be longer.
Great, thank you. So Karen actually has two questions. So first question is, can you remind us of the book you suggested about name it to
Yes,
tame it? What was that
it's
book?
I've got it behind me. Here we go, The Whole Brain Child. And I'll send that
Fantastic.
out.
Thank you. We'll add it onto the PDF as well on the email send out. And she's also asking, how do you know what to do to use the left brain?
So within that book, it actually details everything for you, which I loved because we learn all this as we train for an emotional intelligence coach. But in the book, it puts it in really great language and specific to children as well. So it will talk you through step by step what each side of the brain does, how to engage the both sides, and how to have that conversation with different age children. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry, couldn't get my mic to unmute then. Another question's come in saying the anxiety and stress that a dyslexic child feels, which becomes worse during secondary school as the expectations rise. How can this be tackled? For example, they can't learn chemical formulas. I know you spoke about you loved science, but how do you get
Yes.
them to remember um, or learn them and remember them, I suppose?
Yeah. I one of the big ones, one of my friends' children who's dyslexic has been struggling learning times table at the moment. So putting it into a song and finding different ways that they remember it, because songs actually have a greater recall. I mean, we could all probably sing every single word to our favorite song, but try and remember a phone number of someone we haven't spoken to in a while, that takes a bit more of a recall. So helping create that connection between something that they have an emotional reaction to helps create those neural pathways of remembering. But concentration, especially in secondary school, when you're struggling to fit in as it is, and then again add that dyslexia layer of what if people figure me out as being not seen as intelligent or being seen as stupid, is something that can really play on that and inhibit it. And again, it's having those conversations and helping them talk through it.
Brilliant, thank you. Lisa is asking, my child gets aggressive at school and then I get cross with him. So how do I deal with the situation? I suppose it's a reaction, isn't it, of when they're not coping, they get aggressive. How would you deal with a situation like that from a
Yeah,
parent's point of view?
it, it's the not understanding, the frustration and anger comes out. So that's an easy default that's us protecting ourselves. So when the burst of anger and the burst of aggression comes out, it's a mechanism. So especially if children at school with neurodiversity, this is a default. If I'm if I show aggression or if I am angry in this format, it protects me, I'm safe. And this then also feeds into the home life, the coming home. And if they've been told off, then that whole environment flares up. But this is when the self-management really comes in, and it's difficult. So as a parent, taking a moment, leaving all of that judgment, all of those perceptions, all of those outcomes that you want to one side, and just really sitting and listening with um, no real agenda behind it. Again, it's tougher to do it than what I'm saying. I appreciate that. But the more you can do that, the more the child starts to relax and they see that you just want to understand, you just want to help. And then you can have those conversations around what do you notice when you start to get angry? Is your body tensing up? Are you feeling hot? How can you tell that's happening? What's it feel like to get angry? That must be quite upsetting as well that you get to that point. What do you need from me to support you in order to not get to that level?
Great ideas, thank you. Diana is asking, if a child doesn't react well to praise, how do you praise their strengths?
I guess this is in as if they do something, you go, oh, great job, and there wasn't a reaction. I'm kind of taking
Yeah,
that from it,
yeah,
or they're quite
self-esteem,
dismissive.
yeah.
Yeah. So children see praise in different ways. And as simple as it sounds, it's again asking them, well, how do you want to be celebrated? How do you want to be recognized here? For some children, it's the verbal. There's the language of loves. This might be an interesting one. It goes for relationships and couples that I'm coaching, but also might apply here as well. There's different languages of love. One is the verbal, one is actual gift giving, one is support, and there are many others that form part of that. So they might just have a different language of love that they're responding to, whereas yours might be the verbal, theirs might be something completely different. So I'll hunt down that book for you and I'll put that in the PDF and just have a little look through it. And trying out some of those other languages might give more results.
That's great, thank you. Somebody's also asking if you could add the link into the report you mentioned that came out in November. That would be
Yes, I will
fantastic.
do. I'm
Um,
writing this down so I don't forget.
we'll remind you as well.
Okay,
I'm sure
good.
to, making a note. Lots of thank yous and people just really appreciative. I think if you saw all of these messages, then you wouldn't ever have any doubt about your presentation. I'll just pull out a couple of them because there are so many. But Michelle says, the question is, how are you so amazing? If my child will
Ah.
achieve even a drop of this, I'd be so happy. And just lots of thank you very much, very useful, powerful information. There was one more I was going to quickly try if I can find it. Yeah, just asking people asking for all the different links and the books, which is great. Have we got time for one more quickly if I can find one? Okay, this one is also a bit about self-esteem, but my 7-year-old son is really struggling with anxieties and stress and is having a lot of emotional outbursts. When he says that he's stupid and not good enough, I know you touched on that earlier. Um, I'm really worried about his long-term effect on his mental health and how can I boost his self-esteem? I know you did touch on self-esteem, but what about if it's been going on for a long time and now that it's very difficult to sort of bring them back from that?
Again, the beautiful thing is it's never too late. I work with adults in all ages, and we can still change and make some dramatic changes. So it's never too late. The fact that he's 7 is amazing. So it's so super early. Um, the word that stood out for me there, did you say they used the words stupid? Was that the
Yes, yeah.
word that said, yeah? It's to reframe what that means. So stupidity it's not stupid. There's no such thing as stupid. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. So sitting down exploring what are his strengths, let's really look at those, celebrate that, build that up, and helping him understand that being able to read or write really well, remember things and do all that, that doesn't equal intelligence. And that can take a while to do, but the more you talk about it and the more you invite him to have questions, even those outbursts, that's great. Say, I can see that you're frustrated and you're angry here. Can we talk about that frustration and anger? And sometimes you'll get the no, sometimes you'll get the yes. But when you get those yes, say again, describe to me what's happening when you're feeling that anger, what's triggering that. Why do you feel so stupid right now? Because you keep using that word, but I don't see that in front of me. So, how can I help you see another side? And start inviting those positive talk tracks. So, what part of your brain tells you you're amazing? When does that show up? Let's explore that voice right
I
now.
like that. I like
Yeah.
that.
And making them aware that that voice exists in those moments of negative voice.
Yeah,
Mm.
brilliant. I'm just going to squeeze one last one in. I know it's 8 o'clock, so we do need to wrap up. But Phoebe is asking, is there any advice you can give to pass on to teachers to help build confidence in students so they can help in class and participate without being embarrassed? Which we know with dyslexic children, it is they tend to not put their hand up or speak out in class. So I'm presuming Phoebe is a teacher. So just from a teacher's perspective rather than a parent's
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, something I know that works really well is actually inviting the conversation in class. So getting everybody on their own to write on a piece of paper, fold it up, put it in a jar of something that they don't feel they're good at. So you get a jar with things that you don't think you're good at, and then on a separate piece of paper, you write on something that you're absolutely incredible at. And then as a teacher, you can read some of these out without any names, any identity, and actually ask the class, do these things ring true for other people as well? If you've got, does anyone else kind of feel this way? And you can get some connection through it. So the class can actually see that they're not alone. A lot of the same pieces of paper come up again and again and again. And then we use the celebration jar. So really look at those amazing things that they're good at. And then you can have the conversation of, okay, if you're really good at this and want to learn about it, go and speak to your peer around here. They can help you with this and talk about that. So the more we invite that conversation and make it open, the more people are confident to fully be themselves, dyslexia or not, and put their hand up and be a part of the conversation.
I love that idea because trying to make the child not feel isolated. And I love that idea if they're sharing and they all sort of saying, oh, yeah, I'm like that too. And they all feel one together. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that is actually all we have time for.
Well,
Um,
thank you for having me.
no, thank you so much for presenting tonight. It's been amazing.